did some really good videos revisiting this case. First one's an hour and 6 minutes, and the second part 2 is an hour and 26 minutes. But definitely, if you're going to be into UFOs and get some history on the egg cases, because he's going to do a whole thing on these egg cases too soon. He's got all the case files on UFOs from every library in history, man. It's amazing what Michael Schratt's put together. But I'm going to play this for you guys, and we'll let this one go. Here you are.
Hi, everybody. It's good to be with you. I'm back from the dead again. So the goal here is to keep the inspiration going. I'm going to continue to do these videos because I think it's important that we preserve our history here. So we will continue to preserve this important part of our national history. Now, tonight, what I've prepared here, and the title of this lecture is Edgar Fouche and the Secret of the TR3B. Now, this whole concept of the TR3B has been floating around ufology for 15 years now, minimum. I wanted to dive into the gentleman who really kicked this thing off, Edgar Fouche, that you see off to the right here. And I want to give you the background of where I'm getting this information, how I got into this, what was donated to my collection, and give you the references so you can verify this on your own here. So again, Edgar Fouche and the Secret of the TR3B. We'll do a quick check-in here. Occam's Razor, Cat Master Trash, looking forward to Michael. Chris Tyne, Hertz Zer, Third Phase of Moon. Okay, guys. Third Phase of Moon. Oh, I should point out that I was involved in Jim Goodall, and we had a few other people in his new Battle for Disclosure presentation that's available from the Cousin Brothers. So I want to give a shout out to them. Alex, Humberto, finally, I caught this live. Okay, well, I'm glad we're all here. Let's see where this goes. Now, this is going to be a deep dive into Edgar Fouche and the claims about this TR3B. There's too much here to do in one pass. I've already kind of vetted out the details here, but we're going to do a part 2. But today is part 1, and I want to set all this up so that we have the background on this. And let me go to the next slide here. Special thanks to Dan Banker. So Dan, if you're around, thank you, brother. Thank you. Who donated Ed's original slides to my Aerospace UFO Historical Archives. So what you see here on the left is the actual slide carousel that Edgar Fouche used back in his 1998 International UFO Congress presentation. When Dan donated the slides to my collection, I thought, let's scan those in at high resolution, and let's put this in a PowerPoint presentation, bring it up to 2024 standards, and let's delete the extraneous information, the redundant information. I found some things that were fragmented in his presentation, put that all together and include updated information, newspaper articles, brand new illustrations, and that's the result of this. Now, I've allowed to add his original link at the bottom here. So if anyone wants to follow along with Ed's original presentation, I've linked it at the bottom so you can verify what I'm talking about here. So just giving the background of where I got this information. All right, so a couple of quick bio points on Edgar here. He started out as a machinist making bombs for the U.S. Air Force, worked on projects for the Department of Defense for 25 years, was drafted into Vietnam conflict. 1967 to 1974, he worked at multiple Pacific bases. Expertise in intelligence, equipment, electronics, black programs, and cryptological applications. DoD factory representative. He was involved in engineering manager for multiple defense contractors on classified black programs, developing state-of-the-art electronic countermeasure systems. So this is kind of a brief background on what Edgar was involved in. Now, these are one of his original slides from his 1998 presentation. And this is just the type of work that he was involved in, electronic countermeasure applications. Let's continue on here. Edgar worked on multiple programs dating back to the 1970s, which are still classified. Edgar received over 4,000 hours of technical training from the U.S. government, which approximately half are classified. He spent 20 years working directly for the U.S. Air Force and the DoD. Let's continue on here. Edgar's involvement with stealth aircraft programs is still classified. So even to this day, some of the programs that he worked on involving low observable aircraft are still classified to this day. Edgar wrote the book Alien Rapture: The Chosen back in 1994 to 1995 with information he gathered about classified programs from a very small group of 5 close friends, which were test pilots, engineers, and investigators. So who made up the group of friends that helped Edgar write the book? Who were these people? Who were these people? Let's continue on here. So one of Edgar's contacts worked for the Department of Energy and the National Security Agency as an investigator and had years of experience at Area 51. He was also a TREAT team member, Tactical Reconnaissance Engineering Assessment Team. He monitored employees who had Q clearances at Nevada Test Site, Los Alamos, and Sandia National Labs. So interesting person to be involved in this book project. Very interesting. Let's go to the next slide here. The second friend worked directly for the National Security Agency in the field of electronics intelligence and became a defense contractor after retirement. So that's friend number 2. Another of Ed's contacts was a former SR-71 pilot and test pilot at Edwards Air Force Base. So this is friend number 3. Let's continue on here. The fourth friend joined Ed in the Vietnam War. The fifth friend was a DoD contractor and electronics engineer. He worked on top secret development programs involving ECM jammers and infrared receivers. Let's continue on. Additional information from the book came from 4 SR-71 pilots, 2 U-2 pilots, 1 TR-1 pilot, and approximately 24 fighter bomber pilots. So in totality, it was this whole group of engineers, intelligence professionals, pilots, who all came together to form this book project. So a lot of different sources here. Now, Ed met with his friends at the Silver Dollar Saloon in Las Vegas to formulate a plan to write a book which could preserve their experiences dealing with top secret classified programs while also protecting their identity and security. One of Ed's friends related to him an in-flight incident that occurred in the 1970s, which involved a ball of plasma that circled the SR-71 while he was flying at 74,000 feet in Mach 3. So if you look at this picture here, you've got this blackbird, and then you've got this plasma orb. Now, in the report, it said that it circled around this SR-71 at 74,000 feet at Mach 3, so that's 2,000 miles an hour. It parked itself in front of the left inlet spike going 2,100 miles an hour. It should have been sucked right into this. And recently, we've been hearing about drones. We've been hearing about plasma balls. And I'm going to go to the next slide here. If you look to the left, you can see the arrow. That indicates the point where whatever this thing was, it parked itself right in front of that inlet spike. And with all the air rushing into the air inlet, that thing should have been sucked in there, but that's not what took place. This thing appeared to be under intelligent control. It was basically circling around this blackbird. Very interesting. The mysterious orb parked itself directly in front of the inlet spike of the SR-71. Just incredible, incredible. Let's continue on here. Now, since we're talking about these plasmoids, let's get into some details here. There are some, underline some, who conclude the following. They are a being, they are alive, they are aware, they are responsive, they have senses, they perceive. So this is what some people think that these things actually are. Let's go to the next slide here. So of course I started doing some digging here, and you come across this article, Journal of Modern Physics, October 28th, 2024. And I'm not going to read all the technical information here, but just this upper heading: unidentified anomalous phenomenon, extraterrestrial life, plasmoids, shapeshifters, replicons, thunderstorms, lightning hallucinations, aircraft disasters, ocean sightings. Now, there's a couple of problems with this document. Number one, it is not a peer-reviewed document. Number two, some of the names on this document don't exactly check out. Let me go to the next slide here, and I'm just going to go over some of the quick points here. So it says, as documented by NASA, space shuttle films and detailed in this report, self-illuminating pulsing plasma-like UAP UFO plasmoids have multiple shapes and sizes, are attracted to electromagnetic activity and travel at different velocities from different directions, making 90 to 180-degree turns, as well as colliding, intersecting, and piercing other plasma. Very interesting. Sounds exactly what we're hearing about today. It's very current. Let's go to the next one. What is a plasmoid? A plasmoid is a coherent structure within a plasma. A plasma is an ionized gas. They can occur naturally or they can be formed in a laboratory. Scientists do not suspect that plasmoids are sentient. There are no scientists that suspect that a plasmoid is a sentient being. So I'm just wondering, is there something about these plasmas that we don't quite understand within the scientific community because these things are following these high-speed aircraft? And I also want to highlight that this isn't the first time we've heard about these plasmoid spheres, okay? Let's go back into the newspaper clippings. Newcastle Sun, January 3rd, 1945. Foo Fighters are latest. Washington, Tuesday. Pilots flying over Germany at night report that strange balls of fire are following them around on their missions. They have christened these strange phenomenon Foo Fighters. So this is back in World War II, 1945 timeframe. This is what our allied B-17 and B-24 Liberator pilots were basically encountering on a daily basis here. These same spheres or plasmas or plasmoids. And I know there may be a German contingent to this, but I'm just pointing out that these were seen by our bomber pilots during World War II. Let's continue on. Now, back to our slide presentation with Edward here. The strange object departed the SR-71 when the aircraft reached the vicinity of Beale Air Force Base, home of the SR-71 in Northern California. After submitting his incident report, the pilot was told never to speak of the incident again. So when this Blackbird is getting ready to land at Beale Air Force Base in Northern California, whatever this plasma sphere was, skedaddle out of here, like another function of intelligent design going on within this plasma sphere. Let's continue on here. Through his multiple contacts, Ed eventually collected approximately 24 accounts of plasma spheres interacting with military aircraft. So this is the first time this has happened. This has been going on for decades here. Beale Air Force Base loses SR-71 spy plane. Since we're on this whole concept of Blackbird, I thought we'd dig down a little bit here. So this is Press Tribune, November 22nd, 1989, the beginning of the closing down of the Blackbird program. Let's continue on here. The Atlanta Constitution, March 11th, 1989. And I've got the two things highlighted here. The Air Force announced last week that it was retiring its aging squadron of super secret Lockheed-built SR-71 Blackbird spy planes, successor to the fabled U-2, because of quote-unquote defense budget priorities. Okay, that's what they're telling us here. Then it goes on, the second part here, the plane still holds world records for jet-powered speed and altitude at 2,193 miles per hour and 85,000 feet. Officials estimate that clipping the Blackbird's wings will save $300 million annually. So that's our number. The Pentagon figured, you know, let's do some cost cutting here. Let's get rid of the Blackbird program, and we'll save ourselves in tax dollars $300 million annually. However, in the bigger picture, in terms of the Pentagon spending, $300 million is absolutely pocket change to the Pentagon. That's equivalent to coffee in the Pentagon. So how do we know this? Because this is our latest report, November 17th, 2024. Pentagon fails seventh audit in a row, unable to fully account for $824 billion in budget. And they're crying about $300 million, and they lost $824 billion. What's wrong with this picture? Let's continue on here. Was there another aerospace asset waiting in the wings that could replace the Blackbird? So let's check back to everybody here. Crypto Alchemist, smash that like button. Michael Schratt is the man. Well, I hope so. We'll give it our best try, but we'll still stay humble. Ashton Forbes is talking about plasma spheres right now too. Yeah, that's like in vogue right now. We've definitely got man-made drones without a question, and we've got plasma spheres concurrently with the drone. So there's two things going on here. We know that. Sweet, I caught alive. Fox Mulder, Humberto, plasma is definitely the new age energy. Okay, good. Let's continue on. The commercial appeal, May 4th, 1986. Now take a look at what they say here. Aerospace planes taxi across drawing board. New hybrid engines may hurl commercial jets past Mach 5. And then in this little detail thing, they have New York to Peking in 2 hours. Now I'm going to go to the next slide and blow this up. And here you see the three different propulsion systems that they're talking about here. So on the bottom, you've got your standard turbojet. So that's your F-15s, your F-14s, your F-18s. That's your turbojet. Up at the top, you've got your ramjet. So we're now getting into the Pratt & Whitney J-58, which was the propulsion system for the SR-71 Blackbird and the A-12. In the middle, you've got the scramjet, that supersonic combustion ramjet. And we're talking about Mach 5 and above, and we're talking about no moving parts. So if you want something very fast, you need to be within the scramjet parameter here. And the goal of all of this is to have a military asset that can be anywhere in the world in less than 2 hours. That's the goal in all of this. Let's continue on here. Lewis Center helps plan rocket plane. 12-minute New York to Los Angeles flights are foreseen. The plane dealer, December 7th, 1985. So what I'm doing here is I'm setting the stage for the aerospace contractors in the middle of the Reagan administration that they were already working on this technology. And we've got the Reagan buildup. We're going to talk about this. Let's continue on here. Now, let me bring you to Kelly Johnson. Jim Goodall is a very good friend of mine. He attended a lecture that Kelly Johnson delivered back in 1983. And I'm going to hit you with two of the quotes here. Number one, we have the technology today to travel Mach 16. And then the other one, speed costs money. How fast do you want to go? So if you want to go Mach 3, we can do it. You want to go Mach 6, we can do it. You want to go Mach 16, we can do it. Speed costs money. How fast do you want to go? Now, of course, I had to do some calculations. How fast is Mach 16? Turns out it's 12,276 miles an hour. That gets you within the criteria of anywhere in the world in less than 2 hours. So at the minimum by 83, we could do it. It's just a money issue. We could do it. So the technology is there. Let's continue on here. How is the US military going to get the funding for all these hypersonic aircraft programs? So you've got defense contractors building this. You've got another one over here. They're making test vehicles. Things are going on at the remote test site in Nevada. We've got things going on at Groom Lake going down the runway here. How are you going to pay for all these multi-billion-dollar programs? Well, enter the Reagan defense budget, right? The buildup between 1981 to 1985. We had a 4-year crescendo of absolutely massive military buildup spending within the Reagan administration. Now, which I'm going to get in part two, but a significant number of classified aerospace programs were funded by siphoning off funding from the Star Wars SDI program. That's how a lot of these things were funded. So basically, if you were a defense contractor back in the early 1980s and you had a new program that you wanted to get it funded, you basically got yourself a blank check and it was funded. That's what they could do back in the Reagan administration. So this is Newsweek, June 8th, 1981. Let's continue on here. Now, back to Edgar Fouche's presentation. He talks about, and you can welcome to follow along on the link I presented in the beginning here. He talks about the Roswell debris. So I'm going to take you to the morning of July 3rd, 1947. Off to the left, you've got Mac Brazel. Off to the right, you've got 7-year-old Timothy D. Proctor. Now, this is the morning of July 3rd, 1947. He talks about 3 different types of debris that were seen on the Foster Ranch. I'm going to go to the next slide here. And our 3 types of debris are as follows. Number 1, we had debris that was very thin tinfoil-like material that could not be cut, could not be burned, could not be dented with a 16-pound sledgehammer. That's number 1. Number 2, we had different types of material that you could crinkle up in your hand. And when you let go, it basically rolled out like liquid mercury and then settled down to the table. That's number two. Number three were various lengths of small cross-section I-beams with hieroglyphic type writing on the inside of one of the walls. That was basically the three types of debris. Let's continue on here. Plasma physics, Rosetta Stone for a new source of energy and propulsion. Let's continue on. General Dynamics. So another one of Ed's friends who worked for General Dynamics in Fort Worth, Texas, described a top secret classified program he worked on during the mid-1960s, which involved a plasma accelerator, specifically dealing with gravity warping techniques. So here you've got General Dynamics working on a gravity warping technique program in the mid-1960s. So I wanted to see if I could dig up any evidence to verify any of this. I'm not just going to go on someone's opinion. I want to see if we can verify this. So I started doing some digging here. Now, Ed's contact described working with a foil-like material that consisted of 12 layers of material less than 10,000ths of an inch thick. Very similar to the Roswell debris. It was as flexible as a trash bag, but virtually indestructible. It could not be pierced, burned, or cut. The only way the material could be sliced was when it was super cooled, and then a large electrical charge was then applied. After that, it was cut by sliced with a laser cutter. This material was then used to line the inner portions of the accelerator, which contained the mercury-based plasma. The plasma was then cooled to superconductive temperatures, rotated at 45,000 RPM, and pressurized to 150,000 PSI. Instruments placed within the center of this accelerator exhibited a 50% loss in weight attributed to the reduction of the gravitational field. So in a nutshell, now we're talking about some very exotic technology here. You've got a liquid mercury plasma. You're pressurizing it to very high PSI. Then you're rotating it at 45,000 RPM, and there's a 50% loss in weight. Could that technology be applied to aerospace assets that were procured during the early Reagan administration buildup? That's what we want to talk about. Let's continue on here. So let's do some digging. Wichita Falls Times, July 26, 1964. And it says, search for new energy source 7 years old. And we'll go to the next one here. We'll go to the next slide here. See if I can get this thing to work. Okay. Same article. 10 Texas private electrical companies began the research in a hunt for cheaper electricity and limitless source of power. Joined with them is General Dynamics. So it's beginning to check out here. So Edgar talks about his friend who worked for General Dynamics in the mid-1960s on a gravity warping technology experiment with General Dynamics. This is exactly what this article is talking about here. Their work in 7 years has taken them into the world of plasma physics and into experiments with a bottle whose only sides are a magnetic field. So containing this plasma, yeah, that's what they're doing. Let's continue on here. Northwest Arkansas Times, October 8th, 1971. It says, university adds new members to faculty. I'm going to blow this thing up. Dr. Alan V. Larson, associate professor of physics, who comes to the university from General Atomics Corporation, where the past 2 years he had been group leader of the electromagnetic pulse analysis section from 1961 to 1969. He was with General Dynamics Corporation's Plasma Physics and Propulsion section, serving from 1965 to 1969 as chief of the section. So here's a guy who actually worked on these programs. That's checking out. And then I ran across this article. This is General Dynamics Convair Division, NASA, development of a coaxial plasma gun for space propulsion. I'm going to then go to the next one here. So here you can see the inside page. Again, NASA Lewis Research Center, Cleveland, Ohio, the date April 1965. So the documents are verifying what Edgar Fouche was telling us in his 1998 presentation here. All right, let's continue. This is from the Bill Scott collection. New Scientist, October 2000. We're talking about this plasma again here. This is, I think, an interesting article. They can reduce drag, repel shock waves, and make jet fighters vanish. Will plasma start an aerospace revolution, or are they just another mirage? Continue with the article here. But there are more clandestine applications. The way plasmas interact with radio waves around aircraft is causing more than a little excitement in the secret world of military aerospace research. Could they provide the ultimate invisibility shield for stealth aircraft? Hint, hint, hint. Other researchers have found that plasmas can dissipate shock waves from supersonic aircraft, stifling troublesome sonic boom. So what are they talking about? They're talking about charged plasmas being used as an invisibility cloak, and they're talking about charged plasmas helping to attenuate sonic boom footprints. Interesting. Let's go on here. So then I got this collection from Bill Scott Collection. This is Electroaerodynamics and Supersonic Flow from the Northrop Corporation. The same corporation made the B-2 stealth bomber. So this is January 22nd to 24, 1968. And this is the front cover inside. I'm going to blow up the abstract on this one so that we can find out what's going on here. The research presented in this paper pertains to the effects of electrostatic fields on a charged flow of fluid about a body. The phenomenon was studied with wind tunnel tests and a hydraulic analogy tests. The results indicate that electrostatic forces can alter the flow pattern of a fluid, and it may be possible to attenuate the sonic boom. In addition, if the sonic boom is decreased, there may also be a wave drag reduction. So again, what they're talking about here is this electroaerostatic charges they're putting on this, attenuating and eliminating the sonic boom footprint. Here's the wind tunnel test results. I'm going to go one more here. So this is back in 1968, they were working on this technology. My question is, using charged plasma fields and electroaerodynamics, the F-22, the F-35, B-2, and B-21 could achieve supersonic flight without causing a sonic boom. Is that what's been going on here under the cover of classified black budget programs, basically procuring from the Reagan buildup? Is that what was going on? Are they making some of these aircraft supersonic with no shock wave, no sonic boom? Is that what they've been doing here? I want to explore this here. Could some of those aircraft be using this technology? $1 trillion train wreck. How the F-35 hollowed out the United States Air Force by Bill Sweetman. Very interesting. We're talking about trillions being poured into the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter program. Now, I should mention that my conclusions don't necessarily line up with what Bill Sweetman is talking about, because I like to go kind of on a different slant. I like to take a more documented, well, he's done a good documentation on this, but I take a little bit more of a different approach on this, and we'll think about this. But I just want to say that my results may not necessarily line up with what Bill Sweetman is talking about here. But I want to give him credit for his publication. Burlington Free Press, June 30th, 2013. F-16 plane co-designer to speak in Burlington. So who are we talking about here? Spray calls the F-35 a shockingly bad warplane. So here we have Pierre Spray. The F-35, Spray said, is so poorly conceived that every plane purchased will be a detriment to national defense, both because of its poor design and because its high cost will drain resources from other Pentagon programs. The new plane, which has struggled with design and production issues, is described as the most expensive weapon systems ever built. Can you believe that? Former Secretary of Defense Robert Gates was a critic of the program's expense. Frequent critic Senator John McCain, representative from Arizona, in remarks on the Senate floor in December 2011, pointed to the rapidly rising costs of each plane and of delays in production, and called the F-35 program both a scandal and a tragedy. Wow. Big words, big words. Let's continue on here. Fort Worth Star-Telegram, September 18th, 2018. At home as well as abroad, skepticism of F-35 persists. It says the latest dogfights took place in the past week. A former Pentagon official involved in the development of the F-16, F-18, A-10 aircraft in the 1970s, said in influential defense publication that the F-35 is a dog. And they continue on here. Newspapers in Australia, where the government's plans to eventually buy F-35s are subject of intense political debate, reported that the planes were quote unquote clubbed like baby seals in computer simulated war games conducted by the US Air Force. Oh, that doesn't sound good. They were clubbed like baby seals. The wording on this is just really severe here. Is that what's going on? Calgary Herald, March 21st, 2012. US watchdog slams F-35 cost overruns. So a lot of this controversy going on with the F-35. My question is, and this is what I want to raise here, have we all been played for fools regarding the F-35? All this negative press on the F-35 program, was that all a diversionary tactic? Have we all been played here? Did a certain aerospace contractor use the F-35 as a sacrificial lamb to cover the cost of its real capabilities? Is there something very significant and secret about the F-35 that Congress and the American people have not been informed about? That's my question. I mean, they poured over $1 trillion into this thing, and we've got all these reports of problems. And is that all a setup? Have we all been played here? Let me check back into here. Let's see. Ad Astra recordings, counter-rotating magnetic fields. Yes. Occam's razor. Some of this describes a bubble outside of time of field. Yep, that checks out. Field propulsion craft. Running costs and maintenance requirements of F-35 are insane. Yep, that is correct. Tarek Reed, OG Tarek from Philly. Salute Michael Schratt. Smash the like button. Cool, good, with you. All right, let's continue on here. Now, these are a collection of quotes from President Donald Trump, okay? You can't see them. The F-35 jet, which is almost like an invisible fighter, even if it's right next to it, it can't see it. It's very tough to beat a plane when you can't see it. Nobody has the equipment that we have. So this is President Trump. Does he know something about the F-35 that we don't know about when he says you can't see them? Is he only talking about radar stealth, or is he talking about something else here? Is that what he's talking about? Is the invisibility cloak depicted in the Lord of the Rings series strictly fantasy, or has the technology progressed to make it a reality and integrate it into the 5th and 6th generation stealth aircraft? Is that what's going on here? Let me continue on here. In other words, is Wonder Woman's invisible jet just a pipe dream? Is it just science fiction, or is there something else going on here? Let's continue on. So then I ran across this document. Interesting. The Cheshire Jet, harnessing metamaterials to achieve an optical stealth capability. Timothy E. Beers, Major U.S. Air Force, Air Command and Staff College. Optical stealth capability. Interesting. Let's go on. How cloaking works. To make something invisible, the nature of visibility must be understood. Electromagnetic radiation can have wavelengths from thousands of kilometers to tiny fractions of the size of an atomic nucleus. Specifically, and of the interest to this discussion, visible light consists of relatively high frequency short wavelengths, 10 to the 14th minus or 10 to the 15th hertz, and 400 and 750 nanometers, respectively. We see objects in this spectrum because light is absorbed by and reflected off matter, which in turn hits our eyes. So they're talking about the visible light spectrum. That's what they're talking about here. That's the key to this here. Let's continue on. This research will characterize the recent advances in metamaterials. So that keeps on popping up. Edgar Fouche talked about metamaterials in his presentation and highlight both the benefits and challenges to U.S. Air Force for obtaining an optical stealth capability. Conclusions drawn from this research will help shape DoD investments in metamaterials. So now they're talking about metamaterials being involved in conjunction with an optical stealth capability. That's what these documents are telling us. Let's continue on here. Metamaterials and transformation optics. This is Air Force Research Laboratory, July 2011. And in their publication here, they've got these charts and graphs. The figure in the lower half of the plane shows the scattering from a 3D cloak. And you can get into all the equations if you want to. Now, I got to be honest with you. I can't understand all the theoretical physics and all the equations going on, but I try to understand what's going on below those with the text, and that's what I want to highlight here. Constitutive parameters of metamaterial structures used for invisible cloak realization. So this is back in October 2013, Air Force Research Laboratory. So again, a second paper talking about optical stealth capability. Let's continue on. Now, within that publication, you've got these diagrams, and you can go through this entire publication document, and it goes into the interworking experiments on what they discovered with this cloaking device. Let's continue. Metamaterials' new invisibility cloaks make fighter jets invisible. Some metamaterials can bend visible light, infrared radiation, through a novel optical material that effectively means they could act as an invisibility device. According to the CCTV broadcast, those materials are now being manufactured by an assembly line and will be used to help further China's aviation industry. So here you've got China working on this. We have America working on this. What are metamaterials? In this case, we're talking about composite metals and plastics that use artificial geometry to influence the wavelengths in electromagnetic radiation, as well as elastic waves and sounds. Some metamaterials built using nanotechnology can also be used as super strength materials. In fact, optical metamaterials have already been used to demonstrate invisibility by redirecting visible light around itself to avoid reflection. Hence their frequent reference to the popular fiction of cloaking in Star Wars, Star Trek, and Harry Potter. So here again, this metamaterials, electromagnetic type visible light spectrum, and optical cloaking with stealth. Let's continue on here. New metamaterial yields invisibility for aircraft and drones. Electrical engineers from the University of California have created a new ultra-thin metamaterial that could provide a cloaking device and make UAVs, in other words, drones, invisible. The new material creates invisibility and leaves no electronic, infrared, or visual signatures for enemies to detect. So is that partially what's going on that we've been seeing the last couple of weeks? Are they using UAVs and drones with this technology where they're coming in and out and they're cloaking? Is that what is actually going on here? Let's continue on. By scattering electromagnetic radiation in the visible, infrared, or radar spectrum, such metamaterial will be able to render a coded object undetectable in these wave frequencies by forcing light or radar waves to bypass the object's surface through coding, which effectively cloaks the object. Absolutely. Let's check in here. Crypto Alchemist, I make metamaterials, shape-shifting metals, drones. What about on-condition time travel? Perhaps. Let's continue on here. Now you see it, now you don't. Blinding us with science, the next generation of stealth. Researchers are examining ways to blur an aircraft's outline by using a recently created branch of nanotechnology known as metamaterials. This thing keeps popping up. This is something that I think we all should be familiar with. The advancements in metamaterials are key to the understanding here. Ordinary metals, plastics, and other materials are combined in a way that alters their response to light, heat, radio waves, and other forms of electromagnetic radiation. In particular, researchers discovered that metamaterials can bend light in ways that no naturally occurring material can do, even backwards. It's that ability that could allow a coating of metamaterials to smear an airplane's outline. That's it right there. That's it right there. Using metamaterials to bend light to smear an aircraft's outline. Oh, that's it. That is it. That is essentially what we're talking about here. Metaskin truly cloaks objects' form for radar. Over the past few years, we've seen incremental advancements in cloaking devices and materials. there was a biocompatible silk-based material for invisibility in the terahertz range, plus the neat light manipulating lens system for seeing through objects. So again, they're talking about this type technology. It's all within this documentation. Now, from Star Wars to Star Trek to science, BAE Systems' latest offering, BAE Systems Invisibility Cloak. BAE Systems' latest offering, the Adaptive Invisibility Cloak, follows the high-tech active camouflage model, concentrating on masking the infrared spectrum in a unique way. It also holds the potential to extend this ability into other parts of the electromagnetic spectrum. So what I'm doing here is I'm laying the groundwork that, in point of fact, yes, we've got technical documents, we've got Air Force Research Laboratory, we've got scientific papers talking about this stealth cloaking, optical cloaking technology here. Could military planes be getting invisibility cloaks? Air Force General calls on defense industry to develop Star Wars style device. A general in the U.S. Air Force is calling on industry to develop cloaking devices inspired by Star Trek to protect his fleet of tankers and cargo planes. The technology could alter the plane's radar image so it appears to be in a different location or is hidden altogether. That's the perfect wording. That's the perfect wording. Let's continue on here. So where am I going with all of this, right? There's got to be a reason why I'm presenting these articles. We'll do a quick check-in. Let's see. Should check out my metamaterials. I make aerogel. Oh, okay, good. I also make nanotube nanoatomic structure. Excellent. So where am I going with all this? Okay. Let me bring you the attention of this email that I got from a gentleman. I will not release his name. I will not release his contact info. So we'll keep this under wraps. This is a couple of years ago. This is what he writes. Michael, so I talked to a worker at Hill Air Force Base and he gave me a tip. I pursued it as far as I can. You have better sources and contacts, so I want to pass it on to you. He said the F-35 has a big secret, and he pointed me to a quote by President Trump's comments on, quote, "We have invisible jets." What he told me was that he wasn't talking about radar invisibility. That was all he gave me. It's not electrochromic paneling, but has to do with laser machine coatings of metamaterials and a gold sphere applied to the top of billions of micro-pyramidal shapes. Then a charge is applied across the coating of the aircraft, and what I suspect happens is it creates an optical invisibility above a certain altitude. Hopefully that's a good tip for you to follow. Maybe you can confirm it. Well, the articles that we just talked about were dealing with metamaterials, coatings, optical stealth capabilities. So this person who is a worker at Hill Air Force Base, this is checking out. It's checking the boxes here. Let's continue on. This is the same source. He had an interesting encounter that I want to bring everyone's attention. And we'll go through this relatively quickly here. Michael Schratt, I need your help. I'm so completely baffled by what I encountered yesterday. I just don't know where to start. This was not a UFO, but a jet that was exhibiting very strange counterintuitive features and technology. First, I need to explain where I live and what I was doing when I had the encounter. I live roughly 1.5 miles away as the crow flies from Hill Air Force Base in South Ogden, Utah. I was out jogging. There's a trail roughly 1/2 mile directly north of the base and the landing approach runway. This trail follows along I-84. You can look on Google Earth to see what I'm talking about. It's down a little canyon. If you don't know Hill Air Force Base, well, it sits on a hill, hence the name, I think. So here's the crux of the story. I was running directly west along this path. The sun was going down, but it was still light. I was running through AM areas of trees when I heard a sound that sounded like 2 rather large electric engines. I'm sure you know the sound I'm talking about. As I got into a clearing, I saw 2 jets hovering at no more than 150 feet off the ground between the center dividing line of the highway. There wasn't any traffic, so I could clearly hear and see these 2 jets. The divider line is about 25 to 50 yards wide. What threw me off is the jets did not sound like jets, and I'm very familiar with the jets at Hill. These 2 were absolutely not F-35s because they clearly had two engines on each aircraft. They were so close to the ground that I could see the pilots making hand gestures. They were clearly talking to each other. This jet looked like a more sleek version of the F-22, lower profile, smooth, rounded edges, looked smaller and more compact, but I'm not sure of the actual size comparison. So it gets more strange. They were hovering, making a higher pitch electrical-like sound, not typical jet engines. The thrust vectored nozzles were not pointed down. I'll repeat, they absolutely were not pointed down. This left me really scratching my head. They sat there for about a minute and a half hovering. I was kicking myself because I had forgot my phone back in my gym bag in the trunk of the car. I had left the gym and went to go on my daily running. It gets even more crazy, whether you want to believe this or not. I'm still here doubting what I saw, but it was definitely getting lower light, obviously still visible, but I could have sworn that there was a bluish hue around the craft, but I don't know whether it was because of the lighting or I just don't know. Either way, what do you make of this? Have you heard of anything similar? All right, so in a nutshell, this contact lives near Hill Air Force Base in Utah. He's going on this jog, and then he comes across what looks like very advanced, sleek versions of the F-22. They did not have their thrust vectoring nozzles pointed down. It's kind of like in Harrier mode, but they're not Harriers, and they're not F-22s, like a much more advanced one. Now, they were two of them side by side, hovering about 150 feet off the ground. They were making an electrical noise, not a jet noise. So that's in a nutshell what this guy's talking about. Now, in the public domain, we don't know of any advanced F-22s that can hover, but within the black world, was something being tested at Hill Air Force Base? So, of course, I didn't leave it here. I asked this gentleman, can you draw for me a rough pencil sketch? I mean, tell me what this thing looked like. Show me. I want to know what it was look like. And so he did. So here's his drawing here. And this tracks with something else. Now you can see he's got this line going around the outer profile of the craft. He says blue hue, very subtle blue hue. We'll go to the next one here. And now you can see them side by side. They were hovering 150 feet off the ground right next to Hill Air Force Base. So I wanted to see, can we do a color rendering of this thing? So I came up with this. Now it's probably not perfect, but just gives you an idea of what this thing actually looks like. We go on and use his sketch as a guide, and we go into what the military industrial complex defense aerospace contractors are actually doing. And you come up with this. This is like one-to-one comparison to the original witness sketch. It's tracking. So something like this apparently was seen near Hill Air Force Base. Let's continue on here. Now, back to Edgar's presentation. YB-49 Edwards Air Force Base. From 1973 to 1976, Ed worked on aircraft programs at Edwards Air Force Base. The B-2 stealth bomber was tested at Edwards Air Force Base. Let's check in here. I live in a base housing at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and I was outside about 2 weeks ago, and I saw this exact craft. Sounds much different than a normal jet. Okay, so we got a secondary source now that apparently saw something very similar, and it wasn't making a jet noise. So now we got independent confirmation. No telling what they test and fly. Absolutely. Do these craft have weapons? Do you think of some type? I'm sure they do have weapons. Laser rays, yes, a YF-23 or that notoriously public shy YF something. Yeah, okay, good. Recovered craft, according to witnesses, cannot be weaponized and cannot be piloted. Perhaps. A skin made from micro LEDs or similar, this is Roger Pierce, similar tech actively cooled from behind might offer effective infrared invisibility with projection of a variety of outward appearances, even no glasses 3D. Okay, good, let's continue on here. Now, the B-2 stealth bomber was rolled out November 22nd, 1988. Some of the newspaper reporters that were invited to the rollout, and this is the B-2 stealth bomber, November 23rd, 1988, this is the newspaper clipping. When they wrote their report, they said that the stealth bomber, Darth Vader in shoulder pads. That's how this was described. Others described it as Darth Vader peeking over a fence. And it does look like Darth Vader peeking over a fence. So just demonstrating what, this very early revealing of the B-2, that's what this thing actually looks like. Now we move on to Northrop Grumman B-21 Raider. Official rollout December 2nd, 2022. Let's continue on here. Los Angeles Times, December 3rd, 2022. New B-21 Raider makes its grand debut. Okay. Now, if anyone's interested in this kind of research, I highly recommend going to Air Force Plant 42 Blackbird Park and then going up to Edwards Air Force Base, where you can drive all the way down. So if you take the 14 north, you go past Palmdale, you go past Lancaster, you take a right turn, you're heading toward Edwards Air Force Base. And just before you get to the entry gate, you as a public citizen, you have every right to go right up to that area. They have something called Century Circle there, where they have the F-104, they have different F-102, F-106, different aircraft that you can walk around. But on the way to Edwards Air Force Base, and this was seen there before, you've got this absolutely huge Northrop Grumman billboard sign here, and it says, "It's detectable until it's not." It's detectable until it's not. I wonder what that means. Are they talking about detectable in stealth, as it being a stealth aircraft? Or are they talking about something more going on than just low observability here? What is Northrop Grumman trying to tell us? Are they only referring to radar stealth? Let's go on to the next slide here. That brings us to invisible aircraft, Popular Science, May 1997. And what are they talking about? They're talking about daytime stealth technology, using electrochromic panels, taking an image of what's in back of the aircraft, electronically transferring it onto the top side, allowing it to blend in with its background. That's what they're talking about there. We're discussing technologies where you don't have to wait for the sun to go down, like in Desert Storm. Now we can do the same missions in the daytime. So let's go into what they talk about here. This is the blow up article. Disappearing Act. Future stealth aircraft, such as Lockheed Martin's proposed Joint Strike Fighter, in other words, the F-35, might use visual stealth to blend into the sky. Sensors would measure the sky's brightness and hue, and electrochromic coatings applied over a white skin would change shade to match the background. That's exactly what we're talking about here. So back to Edgar's presentation. Other aircraft tested at Edwards is the XB-70 1964. Continue on. Edgar worked on the following aircraft programs. So F-111, F-15, A-10, F-16, and B-1. So instead of me just telling you what the programs he worked on, let me show you the programs that he actually worked on. So we have the F-111. This was a controversial aircraft, overweight, underpowered. They had congressional hearings about this. There was a lot of battles going on in Congress, but let me hit you with the quote here. There isn't enough thrust in Christendom to fix this plane. 3-star U.S. Navy Admiral Thomas Connally during 1968 congressional hearing. So, I still like the F-111. It's retired now, but interesting aircraft. Let's continue on. Now, Ed did a lot of work on the F-15 Eagle. Next slide. He worked on the F-16 Fighting Falcon. Next slide. He worked on the A-10 Warthog. We'll continue on here. He worked on the B-1 bomber. So these are different programs that Ed had worked on. In the summer of 1976, Ed moved to Nellis Air Force Base and spent 3.5 years working on F-15 electronic countermeasure equipment. So this was a lot of what he was involved in. Now, eventually, he got a call to go to Area 51 Groom Lake. And you can track this all with Edgar's PowerPoint, his slide presentation. Ed maintained a top secret crypto clearance and spent time working at Area 51. Let's continue on here. Now, what was a daily schedule? Ed would wake up at 4:30 in the morning and board a blue-colored Air Force bus with blacked out windows, which would take him to Area 51. There were 28 other people on the bus, including 2 security guards with M16s and a bus driver. All personnel on the bus were specifically given 3 words: do not speak. So you've got this highly oppressive environment in this bus with blacked out windows. You've got 2 security guards there pointing with M16s. and you don't know exactly where you're going, but you can see how this oppressiveness, when you're working on these programs, and these guys don't play around. You're not allowed to talk to anyone on these rides. So this is what Edgar's involved in here. Now, so August 17th, 2013, CIA admits Area 51 exists. So from all this time in the past up to 2013, they've finally acknowledged that Area 51 exists. But we only heard this back in 2013. So for all these years, all these people who worked at Mercury, who took the bus, and then other locations around the Nevada test site, they would bus themselves in, but they couldn't talk about what they were working on, where they were working on it, all up until 2013 when they finally acknowledged the existence of Area 51. Let's continue on. Now, if anyone wants to get a very good handle on exactly what's going on at Area 51 and get the entire historical legacy about the base, the beginning, Lockheed's involvement, Kelly Johnson, test pilots, classified programs, Peter Merlin has done the absolute best publication on Area 51 called Dreamland, The Secret History of Area 51. This is about a 3.5-inch thick volume. It's 5 pounds. It's absolutely excruciatingly well lit. So I want to give credit to Peter Merlin for anyone who's interested. Let's continue on. U-2 spy planes. We're talking about programs being tested at Groom Lake. U-2 spy plane first flight took place Area 51 on August 1st, 1955. SR-71 first flight at Area 51 on December 22nd, 1964. Let's continue on. Have Blue first flight, Area 51 on December 1st, 1977. So this is the precursor technology demonstrator prototype to the full-scale development F-117 stealth fighter program. This is a 3/4 front view looking on the bottom of the aircraft, and we've got the control tower. You've got the Groom Lake mountains in the background, and we've got the chase plane off the left wing of the Have Blue prototype. Now, when Have Blue vehicle number 1 and Have Blue air vehicle number 2 crashed, they were buried at the test site, never to be seen by human eyes again. And so we have the burying of the Have Blue prototypes. They're gone. We're never going to see them again. Now, how do we know this? How can we prove this? Because Elko Daily Free Press, April 5th, 2001, secrets buried at Area 51. So you've got classified aircraft programs buried at Area 51. You've got aerospace assets that didn't quite turn out the way they wanted to, and they swept the funding and the program under the carpet. They buried those. They buried the flight suits that the pilots wore on these programs. They buried those. And then they took technical engineering documents and 3-ring binders associated with classified programs. They dug these entirely huge long trenches at the test site, and they threw radar absorbent material with toxic chemicals into these pits. They poured diesel fuel inside these burn pits, and they started burning all of this. You've got the radar absorbent materials, you've got the chemicals and coatings, you've got the aircraft in there, you've got the 3-ring binders with all the technical documents. They burned all of it up. And that's this smoke that was hovering over the residential area, causing all sorts of lawsuits. We've already heard about this, but just backing up what was going on here. So secrets buried at Area 51, Elko Daily Press, April 5th, 2001. Let's continue on. Now, on the lower left, you've got Have Blue. On the upper right, you've got the F-117 stealth fighter. Now, you can see some similarities here, but the inward canted vertical stabilizers are going toward the center line. F-117 kind of has them going out, and it's a bigger aircraft. So just showing you the difference between the two programs here. Let's continue on. F-117 first flight at Area 51, June 18th, 1981. We're talking about ancient history here now. These programs are so legacy now, and we're wondering, are there any programs that have been procured, designed, tested, and flown at Groom Lake that have never been dislodged or released into the public domain? We want to talk about that. Let's check in. Wayne, thank you for all your hard work on the topic. I thoroughly enjoy your presentations. Thanks, Wayne. Cods and Mayhem. Do you know why they named it Janet? Joint Air, I don't remember the acronym. Mark Z. Hammer. I suspect after someone's daughter. Okay, possible. Salute Michael, Metal Hedrix. Occam's razor. Janet stands for just another non-existence terminal. Yeah, that's good. I like that. Let's continue on. Now, this is another Edgar Fouche slide, and he was kind of bringing out the point that, yes, the F-117 does look like a flying saucer in a front view silhouette. Let's continue on here. How did Lockheed secretly transport the F-117 from the Skunk Works building at Burbank Airport to Groom Lake? Now, what I've got here is a top view, aerial view looking down of Burbank Airport. This is the former location of Skunk Works before they moved it up in 94, 95 to Palmdale. If you look at the right of the picture where I have the white star, that's where the Skunk Works hangars used to be. So that's where all this went down. So how did they move the F-117 from Burbank up to Groom Lake? Well, in the Macon Telegraph, December 14th, 1986, it's a dark secret in California skies. So what this article talks about is the massive C-5 transport cargo aircraft would land on Friday nights late at night at Burbank Airport. Then it would taxi up onto the tarmac near the Skunk Works hangar. All the lights would be extinguished in the Skunk Works hangar. And then they had two 18-wheeler tractor trailer trucks, one on either side, that were used as perimeter blocking screens so that people on the chain link fence that were looking into the area could not see what was going on. And they started loading sections of the F-117, the forward fuselage sections, the wings of the craft, and then other wooden cradles and crates were specifically designed to carry and house other components that were loaded into the C-5. So let's go on to the next slide. You can see here's the C-5 with the cargo bay door opened up. They brought all the F-117 components in this thing. A C-5 cargo aircraft would land at Burbank Airport at 10 p.m. on Friday nights. Upon arrival, all lights associated with the Skunk Works building were turned off. The C-5 would taxi up to the aircraft hangar, and two 18-wheeler trucks would provide cover to protect the loading of the F-117 from prying eyes stationed along the airport's chain link fence. That's exactly what was going on here. What other top secret aircraft have been flight tested at Area 51? And I think at this point, we will conclude part one of this presentation. And on the next presentation, I want to go into what other aircraft may have been tested at Groom Lake. We're going to get into the two-stage to orbit space plane Dark Star program, Black Star program. We'll talk about Edgar Fouche's TR3B and the historical legacy of that. And then I'm going to wrap that up with a never before seen full color illustrations of the TR3B by my good friend Joseph Wraith. So I want to thank you for everyone being with me. I'm going to go do a final check-in here. Carl, hello. Tuning in late. Good to see you, Michael. Wow, almost 200 washing. Wow, I've never had 200. Okay, great video. Great. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to Sweden. Didn't Ed claim to have been at S4? He talks about S4. Third phase of moon. Thanks, third phase of moon. So everyone have a good holiday season. We'll check back with you. We'll do a part two, and we'll have some world exclusive surprises for you. Thank you, everybody.
Rocket scientist Wernher von Braun remains a controversial world figure even today. There's no doubt about it. 36 years since his retirement from NASA and almost 29 years since he departed planet Earth, which he considered a spaceship, at the age of just 65. Warts and all, this German-born engineer and scientist, physicist, and one-time enemy of the United States and its allies, this former card-carrying Nazi party member, still stands as an intriguing, dynamic, very complex human being. I'd like to share with you some lessons learned from his example and from his life experience, and after introducing him a bit further to you. You may clearly notice, I'm using some notes, unlike these other presenters who did so well without them. And I'm flying with no PowerPoint presentation, but a very bright and very seasoned lady reporter told me, a newspaper reporter many years ago, Bob, writers should never, ever speak extemporaneously. That they tend to just go on and ramble all over the place. And then when they get done, they think they can come back and edit and clean it all up and it'll be all right. Well, I took her advice and she was quite right in cases of people like me. And before I do continue, I want to extend a large good luck on NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, which, according to the last newspaper story I read, is supposed to go into Martian orbit tomorrow. So Godspeed on that project. Wernher von Braun was the superstar of space of his day. He had a passion for life as well as for rocketry and space exploration, and it shone through in all his work and in all his communications. He helped turn much of his lifelong dream into reality, beginning in Germany and then for fully half of his life in America. Just being around Dr. von Braun was enough to give one an inferiority complex. He did not appear to seek to do that. It mainly just happened, although he did hold back very little. He was anything but a shrinking violet or a wallflower. And he did, however, seek to be on very friendly, he was very approachable and accessible in most situations, to be on friendly speaking terms, generally with people at all levels. Engineers, janitors, technicians, bureaucrats, politicians, secretaries, even journalists. Hard to believe. He knew and he remembered the names of many people within his sphere. This was the director of NASA's George C. Marshall, a great enemy of his in World War II, Space Flight Center for the first 10 years of its life. And earlier, he was the civilian technical director of the U.S. Army's Space History Making Ballistic Missile Agency and other Army agencies, all at Redstone Arsenal for 20 years in all. And before that, of course, he was the German Army's very young missile technical chief. I began getting to know Dr. von Braun casually in 1957, which tells you how old I am.
Hello, it's good to be with you. This video is going to be part 2 to my part 1 Edgar Fouche TR3B flying triangle. So this is going to be a part 2 here. This video is going to be a little bit longer. There's quite a bit of text in here. There's a lot of reading in here. I generally don't like to go down that road, but for historical purposes, I thought we'd get this thing down on paper. Let's get it down on video so that we can come back to it later. I want to get everything all in this part 2, so it'll be a little bit longer. So let's go ahead and continue where we left off on part 1. What other top secret aircraft have been flight tested at Area 51? And let's continue on here. So what you're looking at here is a letter from John Andrews to Ben Rich dated 14 August 1981. I mean, think about how long ago this is. This is a long time ago. Now, John Andrews was the senior project design engineer Testers Model Corporation. A gentleman, the highest quality that you can find. This guy was the best of the best. If it wasn't for John Andrews, we would not have the secret aircraft research community. He was the one who started all of this. So let me just read this here. It says, Ben Rich, your crew responsible for 2 very strange birds leaving at dawn just at first light from George Air Force Base. One white, one gray, said to be very Lippish-like. Good acceleration, good climb. Don't loiter around George and not seen for rest of day. Attached sketch may or may not be accurate. Could it be code 85 birds might be into a base as relatively open as George Air Force Base? Could it be that would be that the last place eyes from other side would look for them? Could it be that's why they are there? So here's a case where we've got, it looks like 2 aircraft taking off from George, which probably could be later on tested at Groom Lake, but absolutely. So off to the left, you've got John's sketch per the eyewitness testimony. So let me go to the next drawing here. And here you see what these things actually look like in flight. So this would be the pair. Now take a look at the configuration. You've got this blended wing configuration, the wing root to fuselage joint. You've got air intakes up on the top, so you're reducing your radar cross signature. You've blended this in. Now, one thing that would show up is the vertical stabilizer. That absolutely would show up. Let's go on to the next one here. So new black aircraft observed, sighted August 4th, 1999, Rachel, Nevada. So this is right around Area 51. And I'm just going to go over the bullet items here. Craft flew parallel to Highway 375. Seen by 8 eyewitnesses at 10:30 a.m. Craft was followed closely by a T-38 from behind and to the left. The aircraft was described as being coal black in color with a length of 150 to 180 feet. The craft was observed for 8 minutes at an altitude of 3,000 to 4,000 feet. So this is what their witnesses are reporting here. So it is known as the big F-117. It appears there's something out there lurking in the shadows that might be called the big F-117, much larger than our traditional stealth fighter. Let's continue on here. Another aircraft that's allegedly been tested at Area 51 is the so-called Flying Artichoke. So this is kind of orders of magnitude more stealthy, low radar cross section than the original F-117. The entire trailing edge of this thing has this staggered or sawtooth trailing edge, even more so than the F-117. Let's continue on. Now, what evidence do we have of any of this for the Flying Artichoke? And we'll do a quick check-in here. Let's see here. Roger Murray. We have Terrain Earthlings. Alex, hello from Wisconsin. Crypto Alchemist. Roger Murray. Alex, Bird of Prey. Edgar Fouche called Jeremy Rise, alien scientist, and Marshall as helicopter ride to Area 51. Okay, let's continue. So let's go on here. The Flying Artichoke has been seen at Holloman Air Force Base and Air Force Plant 42. So reference is Popular Science, December 1994. That's where I'm getting this information. Now, they've got this somewhat simplistic top view looking down, and you've got these spires sticking out of the trailing edge of this craft. Very low radar cross, probably orders of magnitude lower RCS than the F-117. Let's continue on here. Letter to Ben Shermer from John Andrews, dated August 31st, 1984. It says, Dear Ben, sketches below are 85% correct for one of the stealth designs, also highly modified F-16s with stealth characteristics being flown from Edwards Air Force Base, North Base location. Okay, so here it is again, Edwards North Base location. Now take a look at the simplistic views kind of on the bottom. You've got a 3/4 right view, you've got a front view, then you've got a top view. So you've got almost like winglets coming up. You've got this blended fuselage. You've got air intakes on the forward section here. Let's go to the next slide here. And this is Rudy's drawing that gives you a real good idea what this thing looks like. Just did a great job at extrapolating the details. So single pilot, upward turned winglets. You've got air intakes on the upper side, so you're definitely going to reduce your radar cross signature. And then they probably got some type of coolant to reduce the thermal signature coming from the exhaust off the back of it. So this is drawing by Rudy. I want to give him credit. Here's Joel's full color rendering, and it's great, you know. So Something is absolutely going on at Edwards North Base Complex. You can bank on it. Something is absolutely going on. Let's continue on. Super secret classified aircraft programs are test flown out of Edwards Air Force Base North Base Complex. So yes, it is correct. We've got an absolute large history of black aircraft programs at Edwards North Base Complex. Continue on here. Hangar at Edwards North Base Complex for storage of classified aircraft and other assets. So I wonder what could be lurking inside these old hangars at the North Base Complex. People in the know who work at the test site, Edwards Air Force Base, they know. Some of the people who have been cleared for these programs, they know what's going on here. Let's continue on. Now, the bar inside Area 51 called Sam's Place, this is something we already knew. It was here that Ed heard terms such as Lorentz forces, pulse detonation wave engines, cyclotron radiation, quantum flux transduction field generators, quasi-crystal energy lenses, and EPR quantum receivers. So this is the type of terminology that Edgar Fouche was hearing when he was in Sam's Place. And so there's absolutely some bar talk, there's some chatter, definitely engineers who are working on black programs, they shared some ideas, they shared some terminology, and this is what I want to highlight in this slide. Let's continue on here. After returning home from Area 51, Ed wrote down everything he saw and heard and touched in his personal logbook. So that's where he's getting this information to draw from the resources of what he heard inside Sam's Place and personal application at Edwards North Base Complex. Okay. Ed's NSA source mentioned to him details regarding an unmanned reconnaissance aerospace vehicle that was launched from a B-52. The craft was boosted into low Earth orbit. Ed's source stated that the craft was remotely piloted and that communications were made using the DOCL system at Groom Lake, the docile system, direct orbital communications link. So here's one instance of an unmanned classified aircraft that was air launched from a B-52. So there's got to be other programs going on at Area 51 that use this docile system as well. I wonder what those could be. Let's continue on. When seeking advice about writing the book from JAG lawyers, Ed was informed that as long as he didn't mention any specific names or provide details regarding programs he worked on directly, he could write about anything he wanted. So that's the underlying foundation of how Ed was able to write about these programs. This is the slide that describes it here. Okay, one of Ed's friends, who was an SR-71 pilot and stationed at Kadena Air Force Base, Okinawa, described a very interesting encounter in 1973. While flying back from North China Sea, he encountered a shadow over his cockpit and his avionics systems failed. He described seeing an oval-shaped craft approximately 300 feet across. For the next 10 minutes, the mysterious object moved around his aircraft. So here you've got another supersonic SR-71 traveling Mach 3.1, 2,100 miles an hour, high altitude, 1973. And then you've got this oval-shaped, 300-foot-long shaped craft flying around the Blackbird. Who's got the technology? Who's building this? Is this extraterrestrial intelligence, or is this something man-made? It's a blue-on-blue situation. We don't want to discount that. We want to exhaust every conceivable man-made explanation before we jump on this ET bandwagon. Let's continue on here. In 1977, there was an F-15 crash that occurred within the Nellis Range. The aircraft flew into the side of a mountain during a routine functional check flight. The sergeant that worked for Ed recovered the heads-up display film canister, which showed a large oval object very close to the F-15. Just before the crash, the pilot contacted the Nellis Air Force Base control tower and stated the following, quote, "This extremely large thing is over my aircraft." 3 seconds later, they crashed. So this is from Ed's original slide presentation. Now, I wanted to see if I could verify this crash. I wanted to see, is there any paperwork or documentation that indicates that something like this actually occurred, or can we get any record of this craft whatsoever? So I started digging. And here's what I came up with. This is flightsafety.org. And they've got, here we have crash December 6, 1977 in Area 52 Tonopah test ranges near Nellis Air Force Base, Nevada during ACT mission. Both crew, Lieutenant Colonel David Jacobson, Commander 433rd Fighter Weapons Squadron, and Colonel William Hilton Walter III, Medical Doctor, Commander of the hospital at Nellis Air Force Base, were killed. So it checks out. There was such a crash of an F-15. And then if we're to believe what Ed is telling us, they saw something right over the canopy. And then 3 seconds later, they crashed and killed pilot and co-pilot and backseater. So something strange is going on with our military aircraft. Something is following, pacing, chasing our aircraft. Is it one of ours? Was this a mistake? Was this an accident? Or was this something else? At the very least, something is going on with our fighter pilots here. Nevada, the conspiracy state. The federal government is the second largest employer in the state. 18,000 military and 20,000 contractors. So yes, checks out. I mean, we all know about Groom Lake Area 51, but the amount of workers that are going on here and multiple locations, you got TTR, you've got Groom Lake, you've got Nellis Range, you've got 20,000 contractors. Absolutely, this is where we want to focus in on. Let's do a quick check in here. Renee Cruz. Awesome machine. Imagine what is classified 2025. This is 50-year-old now. Yeah, absolutely. Covert clandestine. His highness. Dark Star requesting flyby. Great. Okay, let's continue on here. We'll continue on. According to Ed's NSA source, EG&G was responsible to the DOE and NSA for reacting to sightings of UFOs and crashed vehicles and recovery of alien artifacts. Well, we've known for a long time that EG&G was responsible for a lot of the day-to-day operations at Groom Lake. Now here, they're saying that they're responsible for reacting to sightings of UFOs and crash retrieval vehicles. Yeah, this is something new we haven't heard about. So we need to drill down further into what exactly EG&G was doing in these early 80s up to late 90s timeframe. This is something that needs to be looked at. Let's continue on here. Richmond Times Dispatch, March 7th, 1990. U.S. jet set record on last mission. So this is the closing down of the SR-71 program. Area 51 has the longest runway in the United States. You can land a space shuttle at either end and still have 5,000 feet in between. You need a long runway for an aircraft that takes off and lands at very high speed. So yeah, why would you need a runway that if you landed a space shuttle on opposite ends, you'd still have 5,000 feet in between? Obviously, we're talking about a high speed Delta configuration, high landing speed. You wouldn't want that for operations at Groom Lake when you are operating such a craft here. Let's continue on. Now, this one's important. According to Ed's sources, 35% of the funding for President Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative program was siphoned off and reallocated to fund a family of highly classified, top secret black budget aerospace programs. The program to develop these vehicles started in 1982. Okay, so this, I think, is a Rosetta Stone. What we're talking about here is one of these examples where the government robbed Peter to pay Paul, is what they're doing here. So you've got the SDI program, and we're siphoning off programs from the Star Wars program to fund these other black aerospace programs that have still not been declassified. I think it checks out. I think it, and we can set a precedence. We can do some paperwork and digging and check into this. And I think I will go to the Reagan Library and drill down into SDI. Like, where did the funding go? What other programs did SDI fund? We know that a lot of billions of dollars in research and development funding was procured and sent into this program. What other things as an offshoot program were funded under SDI? That's what I want to find out. Okay, so Time Magazine, April 4th, 1983. Defending Defense, Budget Battles in Star Wars. So here's the beginning of this Reagan buildup. This is checking out with what Ed's talking about and his sources, that Yes, billions of R&D went into this. The question is, was some of that money siphoned off to fund these other programs? Let's continue on here. Abilene Reporter News, March 5th, 1990. Rumors flying about Mach 5 spy plane. So here we've got 1990. Let's continue on here. The Mach 5 hypersonic reconnaissance spy plane was not called the Aurora. Let me repeat this. The Mach 5 hypersonic reconnaissance spy plane was not called the Aurora. Now, how do we know this? Okay. Because if we go into Ben Rich's book, Skunk Works, and we drill down a little bit here, let's see what Ben has to say about this. The funding for the competition came out of a secret stash in the Air Force budget. A young colonel working in the Air Force Black Program Office at the Pentagon named Buzz Carpenter arbitrarily assigned the funding the code name Aurora. Somehow, this name leaked out during congressional appropriations hearings. The media picked up the Aurora item in the budget, and the rumor surfaced that it was a top secret project assigned to the Skunk Works to build America's first hypersonic airplane. The story persists to this day, even though Aurora was the code name for the B-2 competition funding. Although I expect few in the media to believe me, there is no code name for the hypersonic plane because it simply does not exist. So what Ben is telling us is that the code name Aurora was the procurement funding for the ATB stealth bomber competition. That's what's talking about here. Let's continue on. Code name Aurora was actually referred to their procurement funding for the ATB stealth bomber competition, which eventually ended up being the B-2 stealth bomber. Let's continue on here. Now, this is from the desk of Ronald Blackburn, okay? I won't read all of this here, but there's some interesting points that I want to highlight here. And if you look on the right column, it says US UFOs, green streaks, and the black budget. Okay, let's continue on. Speeds like a flying saucer. Next, General Tony Tolan, who flew F-117s in the Gulf War, said Pentagon spending for secret airplanes is needed. And there, quote, there are other black programs. Meanwhile, the Air Force officially denies any such aircraft exists. Has said that 50% of all UFOs will turn out to be US super secret aircraft. So here we've got F-117 pilot talking about other black programs going on. I wonder if some of those programs could be funded from the SDI program from Ronald Reagan Star Wars. Is that a possibility? Let's go on here. The SR-75 went operational after 2 years of flight testing in 1989. This is all from Edgar Fouche's original presentation. The SR-75 is a hypersonic strategic reconnaissance mothership. It can deploy its smaller parasitic aircraft space plane, which can be anywhere in the world in under 2 hours. The space plane carries multispectral optical, radar, infrared, and laser. Okay, let's continue. The bottom of the aircraft stands 10 feet off the ground. The SR-75 utilizes 2 methane LOX high bypass turbo ramjets under each wing. Width is 98 feet, speed Mach 5, first flight 1987, length 162 feet, altitude 120,000 feet, first operational 1989. Pilot, electronics, weapons, and launch control officer, reconnaissance officer. So you've got 3 people up on the front of these, and it's the launch control officer who sits facing backwards, and he's the liaison between the mothership and the parasitic aircraft. Let's continue on here. This is another one of the slides from Edgar Fouche's presentation, SR-75. The parasitic aircraft that sits on top of the mothership is called the XR-7 scramjet and rocket propulsion. The smaller space plane launches satellites for the National Security Agency that weighs 2,000 pounds. So here's John Andrews' model, and what he's showing is his concept for a parasitic aircraft that sits atop the mothership. So you've got this 2-stage to orbit space plane system that John Andrews has designed here. One of Ed's friends claims to have seen the SR-75 XR-7 at Groom Lake. He also claimed that the development for the aerospace system dated back to 1975. Let's go do a quick check-in. cloudy with a chance of UFOs. Evening, Michael. Hope you're well. Roger. So the SR-71 is the Aurora. No, the SR-71 is not the Aurora. What did you think of Edgar's book, Alien Rapture? I thought it was a good book. I thought there was more that could be done, but generally a good book. All right, let's continue on here. Evansville Press, November 4th, 1993. Model maker unveils new stealth spy plane. Defense group denies real one exists. So here you've got John Andrews, and he's highlighting his great model here, and you see the parasitic aircraft coming on top. So right around the same time frame, Ed's getting this information. He's putting 2 and 2 together, and now we've got evidence suggesting that there is, in point of fact, a 2-stage to orbit space plane system. Let's continue on here. Another good shot of John Andrews with the mothership. I really miss this guy, and so does Jim Goodall. These two were great friends, and they were friends for decades. So I want to tip my hat to John Andrews, who started all this research. Let's continue on here. Here's SR-75 with XR-7 Thunder Dart, designed by John Andrews. And this is really great shot. So you can see the forward shine section. You've got the canards up in front. They can be swept back for high-speed flight. You've got the pilot. You've got the co-pilot. You've got the launch control officer. He's the liaison between the mothership and the parasitic aircraft. You've got these 16-foot tall winglets coming up from the Delta configuration, and then this pylon where the parasitic aircraft sits on top. Let's continue on. This is a 3/4 aft view, and we'll continue. 3/4 aft view. This is at eye level, and you can see these massive ports off the back here. And we'll do one more. This is John McNeil. This is very early illustration. What I'm seeing here, and the information that I'm getting, is that it looks like there were 2 systems. There was one where they had the parasitic aircraft sitting on the top of the aircraft. And then there was another one where the craft was airdropped from the bottom of the belly of the mothership. That appears to be what may be going on here. Let's continue on here. How do we know this? Well, here's Aviation Week Space Technology, March 6, 2006. I want to give credit to Bill Scott, who had been tracking this story for 16 years. He finally put enough evidence together to write this article, and it was an absolute bombshell. Went all the way around the world. So I want to give credit to Bill Scott for this. Here's John Andrews' drawing of the mothership for the SR-75, and you can see the different fuselage stations, the locations. He's got kind of a front view here. This just shows you some of the layout of the craft itself. This highlights the parasitic aircraft sitting on top. Now take a look at that sharp leading edge, okay? If you're screaming by at Mach 8, would you have such a pointed edge? I think we want to modify this. I think we need a little bit more of a blunt nose configuration, because you're going to have that whole leading edge burn off at Mach 8, Mach 12. So just going over some of the configurations here. Let's continue on. So here's the top view looking down. We've got a side view here. This is another John Andrews drawing, and he did a great job. So I want to give credit to John Andrews. Let's continue on. This highlights the configuration. He's got these ramjets up on front with these inlets that probably move forward and aft, just like the A-12 and the SR-71. Let's continue on here. John Andrews with stealth fighter model from People magazine. Alone and without stealth, John Andrews makes child's play of the Pentagon's most secret weapon. So this is in the mid-'80s time frame, where the whole rage was about stealth aircraft. John pieced this story together from eyewitness testimony, from Aviation Week Space Technology, from Jane's Defense Weekly. He was looking at trade publication. He knew that there was a stealth fighter being tested, which was Have Blue, 1977 at Groom Lake. And he started piecing this together. He knew that this was a low radar cross-section configuration. It had tricycle landing gear. It had twin inward kind vertical stabilizers. It had to fit within the cargo bay of a C-5 Galaxy. So when he put that all together, he came up with this model, and it went ballistic. They had congressional hearings where they had this model on display, and people were saying, how can a model builder figure out about what's going on here? And we as congressmen and senators We don't have a need to know about these black programs. And when that congressional hearing went public, this model sold over 1 million copies. So it was the highest production purchased model in all of history, essentially, right under the General Lee. Let's continue on. Tempest in a toy box. The stealth fighter is so secret that Pentagon won't admit it exists. John Andrews shocked everyone by building a model of it. To tell the truth, he says it wasn't all that much trouble. Los Angeles Times, October 19th, 1986. So here's John Andrews in his office, in his element. And I certainly miss this gentleman. He was of the highest caliber, and we owe him so much gratitude. Let's continue on. Here's Jim Goodall and friends John Andrews. So these two are just the best of friends. And John was such a great gentleman, and Jim Goodall is my good father figure. Let's continue on here. So putting all the information that we got together from everything that Bill Scott put together, all of his paperwork, all of his documentation, all of his newspaper clippings, his sighting reports, I put this drawing together based on Bill Scott's information and all his resources. I'm just going to rip through this real quick. We'll look on the left-hand side. Now, this is the Black Star two-stage to orbit space plane system. So if you look on the upper left, you've got pogo landing gear. You've got a stubby vertical stabilizer. You've got these exhaust grates coming off the back. You've got two what look like shotgun shells that you can load in a solid rocket booster. Okay, let's go off to the right side, front view. You've got these spoilers. That's talked about. I've also included the pogo landing gear legs. We've got folding wingtips. Now, if we go to the left top view, you'll see there's this protective thermal section on the leading edge. That's something that's talked about. You've got the Q bay for satellites. You've got rods from God. This is depleted uranium rounds that don't have any type of warhead. It's just by velocity alone they can take out. So you've got 4 linear aerospike engines. This is still on the top view. Now, looking on the bottom view, you've got thermal ablasive thermal protective tiles taken directly off the space shuttle. That's talked about. On the bottom of the space plane, it looks just like the space shuttle. Now, there are chines or grooves that are milled into the bottom of this thing by McDonnell Douglas. They were subcontracting out for the overall contractor. Now, one of the witnesses said that some tiles were missing. This would be on the right wing. On the bottom here, it looks like it's on the left wing, but that's actually on the right wing. So side view on the bottom, you've got the Q bay, you've got the seat ejection system. That stubby vertical stabilizer was covered with a tarp when it was seen by a transient F-15 pilot. I've also got the skids here on the bottom, and then we've got the solid rocket booster that is loaded like a shotgun shell into the aft ports of the parasitic aircraft. So this is my kind of 3-view drawing here. Let's continue on here. Now we want to go to the mothership, and we'll do a quick check-in here. Flubber Lane, good to see you. Brendan Harding, yes. Rods from God, yes. His Highness, go to New York City, A-12 Blackbird on deck of the Intrepid. Yes, I've been there, and yes, very good. Continue on. So here's the mothership for the two-stage to orbit space plane, known as the SR-3. Now, the smaller plane was known as the XOV, Experimental Orbiter Vehicle. This is the SR-3. Looked like the vintage XB-70 from the 1960s. We'll go over this here. So we've got specifications, carrier for XOV, wingspan 120 feet, length 200 feet, max speed Mach 6, power plant, this is key, 6 General Electric J93 variable cycle pulse detonation wave engines, range 6,000 miles, ceiling 150,000 feet, first flight 1988, weight 275,000 to 300,000 pounds, white, gray, black, number built 2, question, operator, CIA, NRO, contractor, Boeing, Rockwell International. So if you look on my top view, you can see these canards that retract. Now, I've got multiple witnesses that said that not only do these canards retract, but they have winglets on them. and I know this is true. I spoke to a witness who absolutely saw winglets on the canards. The whole craft is white in color. It has kind of this black leading edge. Let's go to my views on the left here. And what I've done is I've done a cross-section view where I've actually dug into the bottom of this thing, allowing a cavity for the parasitic aircraft to sit up inside. So if you look at my side view, I've got view AA. That takes you to the bottom view, and that shows you where the parasitic aircraft actually sits inside. So again, pilot, co-pilot, launch control officer, and there's a dorsal ridge that runs along the length of the top of the craft. Let's continue on here. So I want to give credit to Mark McCandlish. He did a great job on this. I asked him to do a 3/4 front view looking on the bottom of the aircraft. Again, credit goes to Mark McCandlish, and the estate of Mark McCandlish gets credit for this. And what you see here is the massive SR3 mothership. And what we're looking at here is a massive air intake splitter, kind of like the XB70, that divides off into the 6-pack. So you've got 3 on one side, 3 on the other side of the center line. You've got these 16-foot tall winglets. You've got the sections that are dark in color along the leading edge and on the chine. You've got the winglets, and then he's got the parasitic aircraft being airdropped from the belly of the mothership. So credit goes to Mark McCandlish. Let's continue on. Here is Thomas Bogan. He did a really great job. Now this is via transient F-15 pilot, Speedy unloading at Holloman Air Force Base, February 14th, 1994. Now, something happened. Something absolutely happened at Kadena Air Force Base. There was a mishap, there was a malfunction where the parasitic aircraft rammed up against the belly of the mothership. It made an emergency landing at Kadena Air Force Base, loaded into a C-5 and flown all the way back to Holloman Air Force Base. So this is February 14th, 1994. And if you see here, you've got the linear aerospike engines off the back of it. You've got the shotgun shells ports for the SRBs. You've got the outrigger landing gear legs. And then you've got this tarp partially covering the stubby vertical stabilizer. That's what was talked about from eyewitnesses who saw this thing being unloaded at Holloman Air Force Base. Let's continue on. So I took all the information together, the drawings, the sketches, the newspaper clippings, the sighting reports, everything from Bill Scott, sent it all the way over to the Philippines, and they came up with this model that I commissioned them to do. And I want to credit them. They did a great job. This is factory direct models for us, so it's a shout out to them. So you've got the white color, you've got the air intake, you've got the darkened leading edge, you've got winglets on the canards, pilot, co-pilot, launch control officer. Let's do another view here. This is a 3/4 aft view, kind of looking about a 20-degree look down angle. We've got that chine section. We've got the ridge that runs along the top section of the craft itself, and then these absolutely massive winglets that were seen by multiple eyewitnesses. This is almost a direct side view, but at about a 30-degree look down angle, and we'll do a couple more here just to give you an idea. Now, I also had them design and build for me the parasitic aircraft, and I specifically asked them to put magnets in both the parasitic aircraft and the mothership. So this thing is magnetically attracted to the bottom of the aircraft, and it actually sits up inside. And they actually have the thermal resistant panels in there. They've got the grooves that are talked about. And if you read Bill Scott's 2006 article on the Dark Star, you'll see that all of this is represented within Bill's article. It's all talked about and highlighted in Bill's article. So this is what the cavity looks like on the mothership. And then I'm going to go one more forward here. And now you can see the parasitic aircraft sitting up inside that cavity here. Okay, so in terms of technology and propulsion systems, the space shuttle is equivalent to the fossilized remains of a T-Rex. Why are we still using solid and liquid rockets? Saturn V, Space Shuttle, SpaceX. So that's a good question. Why are we still using these obsolete liquid rockets, solid rockets? We've got the Saturn V Apollo program. We've got the space shuttle. We've got Elon Musk. He's still using liquid rockets. Why is he using liquid rockets? Has he not been clued in? Has he not been read in on black programs and that there are much better and more efficient ways to get into space without using solid and liquid rockets? Has he not been clued in, or are we all being played here? Let's continue on. Check in here. Hadley Scott, hey, Epic Info, Boston Deadhead. Ivan Lar, found Michael through Richard Dolan's podcast. Great work he's doing. Let's see, Tomorrow Starship. Okay, so let's get back to Edgar's presentation here. Now, there are two versions of the TR3B. The prototype measures 200 feet across. The production version measures 600 feet across. The TR3B is a high-altitude stealth reconnaissance platform. This is all from Edgar Fouche's presentation. Next one. The code name for the TR3B is called the Astra. This terminology dates back to the ancient Sanskrit texts of ancient India. That I thought was interesting. Let's continue on here. The first flight of the TR3B was in the early 1990s. The craft is nuclear powered, and funding was procured from President Reagan's SDI or Star Wars program. So I'm highlighting this again. According to Edgar Fouche and his sources, the funding for the TR3B program came from Reagan's Star Wars program, the SDI program. Let's continue on. By 1994, there were 3 operational models built at the cost of $1 billion each. So is that where the money went? Some of the money from SDI? Did that get funneled into this TR3B program? The TR3B's outer coating is reactive to electrical radar simulation and can change reflectiveness, radar absorptiveness, and color. The polymer skin, when used in conjunction with electronic countermeasures, can trick radar receivers. Ooh, so now we're talking about radar invisible stealth, radar absorptiveness, and color. So now we're on a different level completely here. The circular plasma field accelerator ring, called a magnetic field disruptor, or MFD, surrounds a rotatable crew compartment. Sandia and Livermore Laboratories developed the reverse engineering magnetic field disruptor, or MFD. So here, I think, is a very critical Rosetta Stone slide. Here he's talking about Sandia and Livermore Laboratories as being laboratories that reverse engineer the propulsion system. That's key. So what other top secret classified propulsion systems did these 2 national laboratories work on? We need to drill down on these 2 organizations. What is their real history? What programs were they working on, let's say, mid-1980s to mid-1990s that we don't know about? Were they actually involved in reverse engineering propulsion systems that went into the TR3B? We need to drill down on this. The plasma in the accelerator is mercury-based and is pressurized to 250,000 psi at a temperature of 150 degrees Kelvin, which is minus 189 degrees Fahrenheit, and accelerates at 60,000 RPM to create a superconductive plasma with a resulting gravity energy. The TR3B utilizes 1 multi-mode thruster mounted on each corner. So just giving you background of how this thing actually works here. The MFD generates a magnetic vortex field, which disrupts and neutralizes the effects of gravity on mass within proximity by up to 89%. With the vehicle's mass reduced by 89%, it can travel at speeds up to Mach 9 vertically or horizontally. So if you're reducing the way that gravity affects on mass, you're also reducing your G-forces. So pilots can make these absolutely incredible high G turns, and they're really only feeling 11% of the Gs. That's how they can get away with it. So when you see these UFOs making these 90-degree turns at 40 Gs, it's no problem using the magnetic field disruptor. Let's continue on here. We'll do a quick check-in. Let's see. Custodian File Dragon. inertia. Would the centric force like a gyro interfere with the movement? Fast to us, but slow to them. Okay, let's continue. The mass of the circular accelerator and all the mass within the accelerator, crew compartment, avionics, MFD systems, fuel, environmental systems, and nuclear reactor are reduced by 89%. So yes, within this field, the crew compartment, the avionics, the MFD systems, fuel, that's reduced by 89%. So that's how they're getting away with this. And I'm sure they're employing this technology in more than one configuration. Let's continue. So I posed a 20-question flyer to Edgar Fouche, and I asked him all these different questions, and he actually replied. I can't believe it. He actually replied. He's no longer with us, but I sent him a list of 20 questions. He answered all of them, and I'm going to rip through these real quick. This is a little bit labor intensive and text intensive, but I just want to get this all down on video for historical purposes, and we'll rip through these quickly here. Who is the primary contractor for the TR3B? Edgar Fouche. Lockheed, Boeing, Northrop, Teledyne Ryan, managed by NRO, NSA, and CIA. There were a number of major defense contractors involved to keep different parts of the R&D compartmentalized. 2, what company was responsible for building the propulsion system MFD on the TR3B? He didn't answer this one. I don't know if he missed it, but for some reason he didn't answer this one. 3, what was the day of the first flight of the prototype for the TR3B? They built a lot of different prototypes from the early 1970s on. I believe the first gravity warping vehicle, Triangle, was flown in the early 1970s. 4, how many different sizes of the TR3B were built? Approximately 250 feet for the prototype, and 3 were flying before 1994. The operational model was supposed to be 600 feet. Never saw a large production model, only saw them over Edwards Air Force Base, Air Force Flight Test Center, and Nevada. What military facility were these craft being kept? Other than Groom, it's probably kept underwater or in the Antarctic, don't know. So here we've got possible USO. Yeah, you could store them there. What is the overall mission of the TR3B? Logistics support and transportation for the secret space program. If used on a planet, moon, or large outpost, you would have a ready-made transportable space station. Oh yeah, absolutely. Let's continue on. Does the TR3B carry any weapon systems on board? I have no knowledge of its weapon systems, but the 3-letter agencies in the military love adding weapons. How many crew members are on board during a typical mission? I believe it was a minimum of 4 for the prototype. Please explain how the magnetic field disruptor works. See below. How is the craft capable of making 40G turns and abrupt stops? Ask Warren. So Warren was a friend who was a great physicist and mathematician. What type pilots fly the TR3B? Air Force or contractor? Both. But the military pilots are Navy and U.S. Air Force and graduates of their own test pilot school, like Air Force Flight Test Center at Edwards Air Force Base. Many astronauts were the top test pilots in our military, the top 1% for sure. What type of navigation system is used on the TR3B? Advanced in Atmosphere Nav Systems, Celestial and Star System Navigation Systems, C3 systems. Of course, it would have double or triple communications, navigation, IR, ILS, TACON, radar, ECM, electronic countermeasures, and ECCM systems. What type of flight control system is used on the TR3B? Variable vectored intake and thrusters on the edges and advanced multi-mode propulsion engines on each tip of the triangle. Let's continue on. What type of power sources of the craft? Okay, 2 nuclear reactors. So you've got the magnetic field disruptor, and then you've got 2 nuclear reactors flying over our American cities and the world during the Reagan administration and beyond. What type of materials used to build the TR3B? Advanced composites, metamaterials, and titanium. So here's this metamaterial pops up again. How many total TR3Bs were built? Prototype, at least 3. Don't know about the operational model or many variants that have come since. Was the TR3B the same craft that was seen over Belgium in 1989 and Southern Illinois in 2000? I believe it was the final prototype, or perhaps earlier R&D FOTE and model. So here you've got Ed stating that the Belgium Triangle Wave 1989-1990 was the TR3B. 18, what is the total cost per each TR3B? In 1990 dollars, it would have been about $1 billion. I assume the operational model would be 3 or 4 times that. Does the TR3B have a payload bay? Never noticed one, but obviously they would have different egress and ingress points. Has the TR3B been flown outside our solar system? Wouldn't even venture a guess. Why not? How is the TR3B capable of exceeding the speed of sound without causing a sonic boom? I believe it's the ionic electrical discharge and warping of the gravity that allows that. And we'll continue on here. Please describe what was the early prototype look like when you first saw it in a military hangar. Was the date when you saw the TR3B? 1975, high in the atmosphere at Edwards during the night. 1976, within the southern part of the Nellis Range. Late 1970s at Groom Air Base. The schematic you have on my third triangle drawing are fairly accurate. I was told that the operational model had different engines on the tips, that they had eliminated the rotatable crew compartment. So here you've got Ed talking about flying triangles going on in 1975. That's a lot earlier than we all thought. 23, what is the exterior color of the craft? It has a stealth electrochromatic coating that can change its color and electronic signature. Please describe the landing gear on the TR3B. The only one I saw on the ground used 3 tripads with T-pads, no wheels. What government agency is responsible for operating the TR3B? NRO, NSA, CIA. Was Kelly Johnson the senior project design engineer on the TR3B? I had to get that one in. No, it would have been Ben Rich. Let's go on. 27. Does the TR3B emit any low-frequency electrical humming noises during operation? When we were bike riding in the high desert of the Nellis Range, it made a very slight magnetic hum. It also made the hair on our bodies stand up. It was right over our heads and was pretty much silent. Yeah, that's exactly what witnesses described. 28, are there any lights on the TR3B? Yes, each tip on the triangle. The MFD on the prototype gave out a large diffused light in the bottom center of it. Please describe how the multi-mode rockets operate and who the prime contractor was for the 3 rockets on the bottom of the craft. See below. 30, does the craft incorporate any type of visual stealth technology which would hide it from view? Most likely, since there are electrochromatic coating can change color. Of course, we have developed several types of invisibility since the operational model. The one was saw high up in the atmosphere after dark got bigger and bigger as it descended. Also, the stars were blocked out above the triangle. 31 and 32, what was the purpose of the vents on the side? Variable vectored intake exhaust depend on which direction the vehicle is going. Wouldn't the directional thrust by jet engines on board the craft be negated by the MFD since they are in close proximity? The MFD is not anti-gravity, so I don't see why it would interfere. Okay, now we'll wrap this up with this section right here. How does the magnetic field disruptor work? You know, honestly, how does this thing actually work here? Sandia and Livermore laboratories developed the reverse engineered MFD technology. So key, those 2 laboratories. The government will go to any lengths to protect this technology. The plasma, mercury-based, is pressurized at 250,000 atmospheres at a temperature of 150 degrees Kelvin and accelerated to 50,000 RPM to create a superconductive plasma with the resulting gravity disruption. The MFD generates a magnetic vortex field which disrupts or neutralizes the effects of gravity on mass within the proximity by 89%. Do not misunderstand. This is not anti-gravity. Anti-gravity provides a repulsive force that can be used for propulsion. The MFD creates a disruption of the Earth's gravitational field upon the mass within the circular accelerator. The mass of the circular accelerator and all mass within the accelerator, such as the crew compartment, the avionics, the MFD systems, fuel, crew, environmental systems, and the nuclear reactor are reduced by 89%. This causes the effect of making the vehicle extremely light and able to outperform and outmaneuver any craft yet constructed, except, of course, those UFOs that we didn't build. So I'm just tying this all together, how this thing works. What's the propulsion system? Who are the contractors? What is the capability, the performance capability? What Edgar is describing